Welcome to Let's Talk About It. I'm excited to have you with us today. We're going to have a great time. I want to thank all those who have been supporting us in putting out this podcast, all of our ABM friends, all of our PayPal and Cashapp givers. It's because of you that we're reaching millions through the internet and through all the other things that God is having us do. Today I have with us somebody that's kind of like the Jedi Master of creatives. I mean, he's somebody that God has used to touch so many people's lives in so many different ways and so many different avenues, whether it's helping people learn how to speak better, create better videos, be on television. He's helped people write scripts and movies. And I mean, there's so many things. In fact, I'm going to shut up and let him talk. But let me introduce to the Let's Talk About It fam, Phil Cooke.
Well, thank you very much, Andre. I'm grateful. That's very kind of you. I should hire you to come and introduce me at conferences and events. That's pretty important.
Well, I'm excited to have you with us.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for letting me come on.
Yes, sir. So I know a lot of people that are with us do know about you and what you've done, but do you mind sharing a little bit of your story with the rest of our audience?
Sure. We launched our company, Cooke Media Group, in Los Angeles in 1991. And we've done everything from movies to television to Super Bowl commercials, but we really want to focus on helping Christians use the media more effectively. We jokingly tell people we help Christians not suck at the media. And if you've ever seen much Christian TV or movies, you know that's a great challenge. There's a lot of work to be done, so we're quite busy. And so we produce stuff. We've filmed in about 70 countries around the world, but we also come alongside churches and ministry organizations and coach them, advise them, consult with them to help them kind of raise the bar, whether they're doing social media, short videos, or being on television, as you mentioned earlier. We just want to really help churches, ministry organizations, Christian leaders really be the best they can possibly be. I think, it's funny, Andre, I think we live in a media-driven culture, and leaders who don't they don't think of media as part of that equation, I think are making a huge mistake. So that's really what's been driving me. And, the funny thing is the reason I'm here today is because also during that time, because I'm known as the media guy, churches or ministry organizations have called me for 25 years when something goes wrong, when there's a major crisis. Maybe there's a protest against the church, or maybe, they're being sued for something, or maybe it's an internal problem. A staff member's had an affair with someone, or an abusive situation, or whatever sexually. They just are blindsided, have no idea what to do, and often give me a call. So after doing that for so many years with so many churches, I thought I'd pour all of that experience into the book, Church on Trial, and that's what's releasing right away. So thank you for letting me come on and talk about that.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And in those moments, churches are in real jeopardy. A lot of prayer, a lot of study, a lot of work has gone into establishing this work for God. And now Satan is taking a shot at it, right? He's trying to drop a nuclear bomb on it. And in that moment, you have to know what to do. You have to make the right steps, because if you don't, you can create damage that not only will have an impact on you now, but it could have an impact on your ministry for decades.
That's absolutely true. In fact, it's interesting that right now, as we record this, there's a large church in the Midwest that, because the pastor had an affair years ago, had a sexual relationship, some might call it an abusive relationship, the church is closing. And my thing is, I'm not here to protect anybody. I'm not here to protect the perpetrator, certainly. I'm here to get the truth out. And the critical thing is, I do not want to see a church close because of a stupid decision from a leader or a staff member. And that happens more often than we think. And so my goal is to come in and help the church navigate through that really difficult time and get to the other side, because it's possible. And but there's some things that they need to know that, as you could probably attest to, you don't learn these things in Bible college or seminary. Pastors, have no clue what to do. So I think it's, and you know what? We don't know what goes on in people's hearts, and anything can happen anytime. I often tell people it's not if a crisis will happen at your church, it's when. So we just live in this social media world where it's so easy to say something stupid or inappropriate, say it to the wrong person, somebody gets offended, they sue, who knows? So it's always good to be prepared for something like that.
Yeah, Lord had me do a book myself a number of years ago called Life After. And
I remember.
the whole point was to give hope, even when things have happened, even when, whether you've created a problem or someone else has created a problem or you're part of an organization where something has happened, there is a life after that, and it can be a good one.
Yeah.
God can take what Satan meant for evil and turn it to good. But once again, you got to work with God. You got to take the right steps, right? And so I think what you're doing is really important. And frankly, I think it'll probably end up being a bit of a manual that people would go to during times like that. I'm pretty sure that's part of what God wants to do with it. So that's pretty amazing.
I think you're exactly right. Right, the right steps are critical. I'm telling people now that not just the pastor needs the book, the senior leaders need the book,
Mm-hmm.
the elders need the book, the board members need the book, because the more people that can come to the table during a crisis that are already up to speed. It's interesting, Andre, research indicates that churches and ministries and nonprofits that are prepared for a crisis always come out on the other side better. They always come out much better. So it's always good to be ready and prepared. We want to think, it's never going to happen to me. We love each other. We're Christians. We believe in each other. We're transparent. But I'll tell you, I've seen some situations where people could not believe it. In fact, just a few months ago, a church in the South, a medium-sized church in the South, had a secretary. She was the financial person at the church, embezzled about $400,000. And she'd done it over 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. She paid for a couple cars, some of her kids' college education, some of her house or mortgage payment.
Wow.
And nobody noticed until a check bounced. And suddenly they're $400,000 in the hole. And the church, she's going to have to repay it. She's probably going to go to jail. Mm-hmm. But she can't repay it. The money's already been spent. And so that church is going to close. So it's really true. If you don't have safeguards in place, if you don't know what to look for, and then what steps to take when it happens, you can really be caught short.
Yeah, and I think the thing that people sometimes miss is that a church is ultimately a community, right? It's a community of people. And so, what gets hurt in those situations, those people, that family gets broken up. And I've seen some situations, other type of situations where you'll have someone do something that would be immoral in a different way, maybe split a church, and they're splitting a church family, and there's a lot of carnage from that. So it's good to know that there is a plan, that God can restore, that God can push you through, and he can turn things around. So let me ask you.
Let me throw out a couple of tips for people, if I can, if that's sure. All right, because I think people really struggle with this, and I always tell pastors and ministry leaders, your first call should be to an attorney. You should have an attorney on speed dial, preferably one that has some experience dealing with a crisis. If you've got a real estate attorney or you've got some attorney that specializes in other things, they may not be able to help so much. But knowing an attorney, because one of the big issues here that we've seen this a lot recently is if a minor is involved, it has to be reported to the authorities. Right. It has to be. I mean, there's in the old days, my dad was a pastor in the old days. And in those days, either there were no laws or the laws were just being created. It was kind of murky. Most people didn't really understand them or know about them. And very often, if a minor was involved, the parents would say, let's keep this quiet. We don't want to go public. We don't want to ruin Johnny's high school experience or Susan's high school experience. And so things got swept under the rug. But now, which is much better, it has to be reported. And I'll tell you, I know pastors that had nothing to do with the abuse who almost went to jail just because they didn't report it.
Right.
So I would just tell leaders now in the church, number one, get a good attorney. He knows who needs to be notified. He knows how it needs to be notified. So that's really, really important that we understand that if a minor's involved, it needs to be the authorities need to be notified right away. Other great tips are, I always tell people to look for red flags. When I go through a crisis with an organization, when we get to the other side, I always get the leadership team together and I say, now look, now that we're through this, looking back over the last year or 2 years, did you see any red flags that you should have noticed? And almost every time they will say, absolutely. Now I understand why Ralph was doing this, or I understand why Bob was doing this. And so I just, I don't want to, I would say false accusations can be terrible. Yeah. They can destroy a person's life. They can be just as bad as a real problem. But at the same time, we should be sensitive. to things. I remember writing this. There was a church in Chicago when I was writing the book that had a couple sharp ushers, and they noticed that a newcomer, a visitor, a young guy was really taking a lot of time looking at the kids in the church. I mean, he just really was spending a lot of time looking at kids in the church. And so they got concerned, and they went up, these two ushers went up, introduced themselves and got his name, looked him up, and sure enough, he was on the sex offender registry. And so they sat down with him to go over the rules about, if you're on the sex offender registry, there's rules that you have to follow outside for the rest of your life. So we should never be afraid to put those rules in place inside. So just being aware of red flags, that youth leader that's spending a little too much time with that one person in the youth group, or that executive pastor that comes in strangely looking like he has a hangover morning after morning. We don't go public, we don't make a big deal, but it's at some point it might be worth it to go to a senior leader and say, look, I noticed this about Sam over here, and I wonder if we should have a conversation with him. And those things, I'll tell you, by seeing those things early, it can dramatically save a horrible situation.
Yeah, that's good advice. So, one of the things that I have had brought to me even today was someone with an idea. And I think maybe they wanted to write a book, or they want to write a script or anything like that. Is there some advice you have for those kind of people that have something in their heart, but not really sure what to do next, or not always sure of what steps they should take so that it's excellent?
Yeah, the creative world is my wheelhouse. That's what I love. And I love pastors like you who are visionary and thinking about movies and thinking about television and thinking about all the different ways you can get the message out. Because, today it's not just who's in the sanctuary. There's a much bigger audience out there. And so I encourage people, think about this stuff. When God gives you an idea, I think it's so important. I think the first thing to do is, wherever you are in the country, find a community of people that are like-minded. For instance, if you're in Detroit, if you're in Chicago, if you're in Nashville, if you're in Atlanta, find creative people, particularly Christians. If you happen to be a Christian, find creative Christians in your neighborhood or your community, because chances are they've been where you are, and they may have published a book successfully. They may have written a screenplay successfully. I was in Claremore, Oklahoma last weekend, which is, a half hour, 45 minutes outside of Tulsa, speaking at a church. There was a network conference, a network of churches that came together for a conference. And a guy in that church I discovered was a Hollywood screenwriter. I mean, he lives in Claremore, Oklahoma, and yet he sold multiple scripts in Hollywood. So you don't have to live here. It's helpful if you do sometimes, but you can be anywhere. So number one, find people around you that may have experienced that, have gone through that. I encourage you there's always a group of people in every city, every town in America, pretty much, that have that creative urge and then have some experience doing that. For instance, if you're an actor, what is the local theater scene like? Is there a local agent for TV commercials? Go find those people. Sometimes, they can reach out to me or someone like me here in Hollywood. But, the fact is, I'm not sure about Claremore, Oklahoma. I'm not sure about Charlotte, North Carolina. So it's better to find people in your area that have some experience there. And the other thing you could do, I would encourage you to do, is find people that believe in that dream. Find people that may be willing to fund you early on. I think one of the great problems I have with the way Christians view Hollywood is that we look at Hollywood as the enemy so often. Surely we may not like a lot of the stuff Hollywood does. However, you wouldn't be that way in the mission field. If you were going to try to send missionaries overseas to some country, you wouldn't surround their village and hold up signs and criticize them. You'd become one of them. You'd become their friend. And what if the church raised up a generation of media missionaries that came to Hollywood and New York and Atlanta and Dallas to do that very thing, to get inside the industry and be a witness there? So I'd love to see churches raise those up, which means if somebody's watching who has funding or could support a local creative person, do it. Reach out to someone locally in your area and help support people with a creative vision for trying to change the world. Because, like I said before, it's a media-driven culture. And if we don't take back the media in a powerful way, I think we're going to lose this generation.
Yeah, I know for me, I've written some screenplays. Your organization's helped me with that, and we produced our first film. In fact, that's what this church from is when we did our premiere. And what helped me was going to something called Act One Writing for Hollywood. And so
Yes.
Act One is a Christian organization that helps teach Christians, and not just Christians, but definitely Christians, how to write screenplays and how to do it professionally. So I had some
Yeah.
ideas, but I didn't actually know the proper way to write it, the proper way to present it. And going to that school, in my case, I did it online, that taught me a lot. And I'm still
Yeah.
learning, but it was a big step for me.
Yeah.
And I still have some
Yeah.
connections from that. So that's something that
Yeah.
I totally agree with.
I'm a big believer that you need to invest in yourself.
Mm,
So often we think, God's given me this idea for a script or an idea for a book. I'm going to wait till I find a producer. I'm going to wait till I find a studio. Or I'm going to wait till I find a publisher. Let me tell you something. Invest in yourself. The fact that you went to Act One, which
hmm
I'd encourage everybody watching or listening to this, Google Act One Hollywood. It's a
hmm
fantastic screenwriting program. They also have a producing program, and you're being taught by actual working screenwriters and producers.
hmm
And the networking, ability is absolutely amazing. And there's other opportunities like that. So invest in yourself. Get the right computer. Invest in the right apps.
hmm
Get the stuff you need. Don't wait for the boss to do it. Don't wait for your department head to do it. Don't wait for you to miraculously meet somebody. Go out there and invest in yourself, because nobody's going to believe in you or your project unless you do.
Right.
So I just encourage people, go to the conferences where you can get the kind of information you need.
hmm
There's all kind of great Christian conferences out there for professionals in the industry. So I just encourage people, invest in yourself. It can make really a dramatic difference in your career.
Well, I think something else that I've learned, and you've obviously been talking about for a very long time, is doing things with excellence. There's a
Yeah.
story of the widow woman whose sons were about to be taken as slaves. And the prophet said, rather get some bowls, don't get a few. Tells her to pull the oil out till it's full. And then she
Yeah.
comes back to him, and he's able to help her start a business and pay off her debts. And I think too often we gather a few bowls. We're not as diligent as we should be. We don't get the information we should get, or we don't,
Yeah.
do the work we should do, or we half finish a job and then we don't pour till it's full. It's kind of half full. It's kind of a quarter full. Now we have the vision of it as full, but
Yes.
it's not actually full. It's not ready. And so we try to put things out there prematurely. And, it's almost like we expect God to make up the difference between our average work and it being exceptional work. And God puts his blessing on your exceptional work, right? When you're diligent, that's when he
Right.
puts the blessing on it. And so I found out in my process that I did just that. Different scripts I'd written, different things I had done, and I think I was ready, and then it would be like, God, nope, go back to the drawing board, keep going, keep going until you
Yeah.
actually have it excellent. And when it was at a place where God could do something with it, doors opened.
It's funny in Hollywood here that idea people are a dime a dozen. Everybody's an idea person. Go to a party, everybody's got an idea for a movie. But the people that are really valued out here are the people who can execute, who can take that idea and make it happen. So you're exactly right. You are judged by your work. If you do shoddy work, if you do substandard work, and nobody's going to call you back. But if you develop a reputation of being someone who can take an idea, make the idea happen, and make it happen really, really well, suddenly you're going to get noticed and you're going to start getting calls from people. So I tell people, no matter what you're doing right now, it could be insanely small.
Mm-hmm.
Insanely small. I remember that early in the days of video games, PlayStation got a game emailed to them. Somebody had put together a game at home, and it was just a cheap little thing that they had put together on their own computer. But the PlayStation people looked at it and realized, holy smoke, this is amazing. This guy's really pretty good. And guess what? Today, that guy runs a major division for PlayStation. So he had just done the little game, but he had done it so well, it got people's attention. So I encourage people, always do the best you can. Everything you do is an example of your ability, your work, and people judge you based on everything. So don't drop the ball and do the best you possibly can every time out.
Well, you're ministering to me, because one of the challenges that I've been having is trying to do too much stuff. And I've heard the statement, less is more. And I know you have a book, Ideas on a Deadline, for example.
Yeah.
And so I I have found that when you can do a little bit less and do it with excellence rather than do a lot
Yeah.
and then not be as excellent, that it's
Yeah.
better, right? It's a little bit better just to maybe hone in on a project. In fact, I have a guy that here in the Detroit area, and he's not a member of my church, but he was when I was pastoring in a different church. And he came to me and he said, I've got 3 business ideas. And, he's saying, what do I do with these? And I told him, you got to pick one. And he said he left there upset. He was mad because he's like, I got these 3 ideas and, pastor's saying pick one. And
Yeah.
I talked to him again recently. I spoke for him recently because his one has turned into a massive ministry. In fact, when the Super Bowl came here, or not Super Bowl, but when the playoffs were here and the commissioner was here,
Right.
you see pictures of him picking the commissioner up. I mean, he's really
Yep.
exploded because he took that one and he just did everything with it that God wanted him to do. And I think that's clearly a key to doing things with excellence is doing less. And I'm preaching to myself a little bit, but
Well, that's brilliant.
but yeah.
Brilliant. It's funny you say that because I wrote a book years ago called One Big Thing, Discovering What You Were Born to Do. And I wrote it because I did some research and discovered that people who are extraordinary, people that get noticed, that get on the radar, are not the people who are pretty good at a lot of things. They're the people who are amazing at one big thing. So many, when I speak at a conference or an event, very often I'll get tons of people there who will say, Phil, I'm pretty good at a lot of stuff, but I'm really not amazing at one thing. And I just encourage people, what is that one big thing that God put you here on the earth for? What did he put you here to solve? What's the one skill you have that's incredible? Think about that, focus on that, and let some of this other stuff go. I'm a big believer in saying no. We have to say no to a lot of good ideas to have the time and the space for making great ideas happen.
Yeah.
So I just think that you're exactly right. Simplify, 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 and be amazing at that one big thing.
Well, I like that. You have to say no to some good ideas to go after the great idea. I mean, I'm not joking when I say you're preaching to me right now, because it's literally where my head has been today. I'm looking at some things going, I've got to cut something because this is great. Why am I doing this? So yeah, that's really good. So of course I am a pastor and I've had a chance to do some media. I know that's one of the things that you do. You talk a lot about pastors doing media, churches doing television, local television shows and other type of things. Is there anything that any advice you have for those that are thinking about those type of things going down that road?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell pastors all the time that everybody's trying to tell pastors television is over. Everything's moving online. But the truth is, if television was dead, why do they still have the biggest events in the world on broadcast TV? Think of the Grammys, think of the Oscars, think of the Super Bowl, all the biggest events, NFL football, the biggest events there are out there are still on broadcast television, which means they're there because it's a vast audience. And that vast audience needs to be reached with your message. And so what we've discovered over the years is I like to start out with local television, be on local TV to give the community an idea of what your service is like. We live in a generation, maybe the first time in my lifetime, that has no clue about church. My daughters went to Burbank High School. They would constantly come home and say, Dad, kids in my school have no idea what Easter is. They think it's about bunnies. They have no idea what Christmas is. So we have a generation that's grown up with no knowledge of the church. So number one, I think let's get churches on the air in local communities and show people what God is doing inside that building. That's number one. And also that can help drive people to your church. Once they see, we also live in a generation of people today that want to see something online or see something on TV before they're going to experience it for real, before they show up. And so every opportunity we can do, I'm encouraging people to do it because I think, and the other thing, and I'll shut up, I don't want to rant, but I think that the funny thing about television is when you find, if I'm looking for you online, I have to know your name or the name of the church. I have to be searching for it. Television, I can't tell you the number of stories of people whose lives have been transformed just because they were flipping the channels and they came across somebody. Robert Morris is a pastor in Dallas. He intentionally makes his the last show before NFL Sunday Ticket starts. So on Sundays, his show is the last thing people see before the NFL football game. Now, he said, you have no idea how many letters I get from women who say, my husband got saved holding a beer, getting ready for the football game, but you were on. He tuned in early. You were on. He listened to your message and accepted Christ. So I just think there's so many strategic opportunities for being on television. I just encourage people to at least consider it. If, call me, email me, we'll walk you through it. I think it's a great thing to think about.
Yeah. It's even listening to you talk about it, I've had some opportunities in the past to be on local television. I've heard some of those stories, but I will say even more so, how many of these massive ministries are led by people who saw Billy Graham on television one day, Oral Roberts, somebody else, and Fred Price, just going back a little bit. And their story was just what you said, that, hey, I was just flipping through the channels and this guy said something that hit me, or this woman, Joyce Meyer's another one, and it's changed my life forever. And I think probably the most impactful television ministry right now is Joel Osteen's, my guess, 7-8 million a week. The last time I saw a long time ago. So there is something there. And I'm a big believer in using every avenue we can to reach people. I mean, that's,
it's funny.
Yeah.
Just to prove you're right. And 20 years ago, Billy Graham came to me and asked me to do a 1-hour TV special that somebody who would never in a million years be interested in watching Billy Graham would watch. And we took him at his word and made it kind of MTV meets Billy Graham. We opened it with a guy committing suicide in his car. It was different from anything they'd ever done. And when it aired nationwide, the LA Times reported that it generated 1 million calls for salvation. So think about that.
Wow.
1-hour television special leads 1 million people to Christ. So that gives you an idea. It's not my genius by any means, but it's the power of television. It's the power of media. So I just think that it is worth thinking about, and you're exactly right.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everything that you're doing. Obviously, your new project is the book.
Yeah, Church on Trial.
Church on Trial.
How to protect your congregation, mission, and reputation during a crisis. So I still do the creative stuff, but I'm focusing on that right now.
And if people want to reach you, they just go to philcooke.com. Is that the best way for them to get to you?
philcooke.com. I'm Cooke with an E. So PHILCOOKE.com. They can get the book there. It becomes available in July, but you can pre-order it now, be the first to get it. So, I'd love to see people go and check it out. Buy it for your pastor as a gift. Might be the thing to do.
It might be. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Appreciate what you're doing. I just want to pray for a second for creatives, if that's okay, and pastors as well. Father, we thank you that you are a creative God, that you place so many ideas in our hearts. And I pray that you speak to every person that's watching this, that's listening to this, about that idea and the next step that you want them to take, so that what you place in their heart comes to fruition and it can impact the lives of so many. I pray, Father, for those ministries that may be either in a place where they're approaching crisis or are dealing with crisis, that those that are in a place where they can stop it, you show them those red flags and they can make adjustments. And those that are going through it, you give them that clear wisdom that they need so that they go through this valley of the shadow of death and come on out on the other side, enjoying the life after that you have for that ministry. And I pray, Father, for Phil, and thank you for all that you've had him do and that you're having him do, prosper this book and all that he's doing. We give you praise and glory for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks again. And thank you to all those who are checking this out. Once again, those who are supporting us as friends of Andre Butler Ministries, and those who are giving on Cashapp and of course, PayPal. We're looking forward to seeing you guys next month, and know that God has a future for you.